Welcome back to Unsolicited, where we give you the unsolicited insights on all things related to government contracting. So today, our guest...
Pause, y'all. We good? Okay, keep going, y'all.
Okay. Today, our guest knows the Federal Acquisition Regulation like few others, and even makes it entertaining. Justin Lerma is a seasoned federal acquisition leader and educator who is trained in thousands of contracting, has trained thousands of contracting professionals across more than 30 government agencies. As a core instructor for Digital IT Acquisition Professional, or DITAP, the program, he's helped reshape how contracting officers think about modern procurement, integrating agile, AI, and user-centered design into how the government buys technology. So he's the creator of ASI Education, a YouTube channel that blends humor and pop culture with real-world acquisition insights, and proving that the FAR doesn't have to be boring. Justin, welcome to Unsolicited.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I will say I did not create ASI Education. I do contribute to it. I just want to say that some really great friends of mine, like Will Roberts, that's his brainchild. He just invites me in to collaborate with him and that crew. So I am thankful though to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I love that. I hope to tune into that sometime and find out all that you're teaching, because I'm pretty excited about having you on as a guest. I hear great things about how you're able to educate people in the world of government contracting. That excites me personally. So let's jump right in here. You said that the FAR overhaul has contracting officers thinking the way that they've done business for decades maybe has to be rethought. So what was the trigger for this massive change, and why now?
I think with the new administration coming in, and us seeing a big change in the number of 1102s and program folks that we have in the government was a big push here. Now, I do think for a really long time, people had hoped that there would be some change to the FAR. Many times you would see people say, well, the FAR hasn't kept up with technology, for example. That's actually like a really big thing. FAR hasn't kept up with technology, the clauses haven't kept up with technology, etc. So we knew that hopefully at some point something would happen, and I think just with the new administration coming in, it was a good time for that to occur. And they have, I know that there's a lot of comments about it online right now, but there are a lot of really fantastic people working on it, working on those practitioner albums. So I do hope and do believe that we're going to have a whole bunch of resources available to us to help figure out like what we're supposed to do now, because some things are changing pretty substantively.
So there's some conversations about the FAR being a relatively young document. So why then has it been treated like gospel over the course of time? And what's the I guess I would say panic, but it appears to me to be a little bit of panic about the complete overhaul that it's going through. Do you think that's just because people have gotten maybe set in their ways with how things have functioned, or what do you think is the concern of how it was being treated like gospel, but it's being allowed to change?
There was something before the FAR that existed, and I'm forgetting what it was called. I can very clearly remember some friends and teachers referencing it and referencing how contracting used to be. So there was something before that, and then came the FAR, and now we have this other document that's popping in. For a really long time, I mean, it feels like a really long time, contracting officers have always, and legal folks and policy folks have always been, I don't want to say attacked, that's probably not the right word here, but I do get a general sense that there's a lot of fear. There's fear of people looking like they're rigging competition. There's fear of people going to jail. I mean, I've many times have had people ask me, what are your thoughts on me having like professional insurance, you know, because I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to put my signature on that kind of thing. Um, on top of that, you have sometimes conflicting ideas, right? Where the contracting officer may want to try something, but during some sort of review, they get a lot of pushback on that particular thing. And all of that can sort of lead to a feeling of like we have to be really cautious, we have to be really careful, we have to, you know, be very, very specific about our interpretations. If it's not in the FAR, we should maybe consider that it's wrong or not possible. And that's not really the case. Also, so sorry about my dog barking in the background. But generally, we have built an idea, an understanding of how we should be doing business. We know how generally we are going to go approach certain kinds of procurements. And so now with this overhaul, there are certain pieces of that puzzle that feel like they're being taken away from us. Um, some there are some improvements certainly. I don't want to make it seem like the overhaul is this like awful thing because it is not. And again, a lot of the folks that I know that are working on it are really great practitioners. But you know, the 8A program is a really great example of this, where we have these situations where it was an acquisition strategy to move really, really fast and use certain businesses and maybe sole source directly to them, or have access to a pool of folks that we really wanted to use. Um, we're not, it seems like we may not have access to that anymore. And so that, of course, anytime you have a change in how we tend to do business regularly, there's going to be some fear there, like there is right now with this overhaul. Um, but what I absolutely know about 1102s and policy folks and legal folks, that the really good ones have a really excellent sense of interpretation. And they're already probably thinking about, oh, okay, if this is the scenario that I'm going to be placed in, how do I function within that? Um, I think folks who understand that idea, how do I function in this new situation? How do I interpret? Are going to have an easier time than maybe folks who would prefer to use a very typical, I'll say, acquisition strategy, um,
So people
especially if it's
often
been taken away.
say that, you know, there are contract companies that are utilizing back doors and loopholes, and that they might lose some of the advantage with the rewrite because they won't know where those things exist. Because is it really a back door or a loophole if it exists? But to your point, you said some folks interpret it that if it's not written, you can't do it, and other people interpret that if it's not written, you can clarify it and do it. And so it's become these easy button practices, for lack of better terms. And now, because things are changing so much, those practices that people understood that some considered backdoors and loopholes are maybe disappearing or are relocating. Do you think that's what has people a bit, you know, scared for the changes?
Well, the FAR gives contract officers, like the FAR says, like, hey, if it's not here, but it's not forbidden for you to do it, like you can do it, right? Like it's there, it's been there, it's a little bit more front and center, I think, in the FAR overhaul now. I will say, however, that a lot of times contracting officers are not allowed to use that particular bit of power that's sort of given to them. Um, but what I think you're sort of talking about is it's not a loophole, right? But the FAR has a lot of information that tells us, hey, we might be able to do something that can help us move a little bit quicker, access, you know, a certain group of people. Um, I mentioned the sort of the small business aspect of this. You know, that's a really great example. So there are, you know, let's talk about tribal organizations for a minute. Really great tribal organizations that do great work, that help the tribe when they get that work. And if now the idea is, well, I can't sole source anymore to 8A organizations unless they compete. We're now talking about um, a change in business models and the way that people used to tend to operate, right? I don't know how many tribes or Hawaiian natives or ANCs have a schedule or cared to get on Oasis Plus or tried to get on SEWP or anything like that. Um, well, that's a whole shift in how they did business because, again, I wouldn't call it a loophole. You can use them. You can approach those organizations in a sole source manner, and you can get really fantastic work. Um, but that seems to be getting pulled away from us. So now, if that was my acquisition strategy, if my program office felt comfortable with that acquisition strategy and I felt comfortable with it, and we have access to these folks and we want to hold on to these folks, well, the rug just got pulled out from under me. Um, so that's really, I think, what the big concern is, right? We're now challenging acquisition strategies that have worked in a way that's benefited us.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting. I've had the opportunity in the military to sit in front of leaders that say, some people are really threatened by boundaries because it tells you where you can't go. But other people are really empowered by boundaries because when you know where you can't go, everything else in between is freedom of maneuver, right? And when you know the boundaries are, then you can learn to navigate the rest of those spaces with a little bit more comfort. And I think the discomfort might be that because these things are changing, everybody's brand new again. And you lose some of that institutional knowledge that maybe has guided you through procurement because now you have to learn it all over again with everybody else.
Yeah, we lost an incredible amount of institutional knowledge over the last year. And I think your assessment's correct. And sort of like what we talked about before we kicked things off, education or training or whatever you want to call it has been tough. I mean, some folks, I would actually say a lot of folks would generally say that the education we have is maybe not helping us to be really great strategic thinkers or interpreters, but rather maybe rule followers in some ways. And I think that's also not like specific to, I think, this kind of work. I think it's probably specific to a lot of different kinds of educational experiences. But I don't I think the real kick here, or the real thing we need to try and figure out now, is like, how do we get folks to get to that point where they see a boundary and realize, okay, I know I can't cross this boundary, but everything in between point A and point B, I don't have to take a direct shot there. I can, weave off to the side a little bit. I can move over there. What what I think is sort of interesting about this, and I'm going to say this, but it's not, I'm not like it's not a comment on the profession or anything. But you mentioned DITAP earlier, and one of the great hallmarks of DITAP, I think, is we give folks this self-assessment test, and there's lots of different tests. People have taken Myers-Briggs tests and things like that. And one of the tests that I've experienced is called a DISC assessment. And within that assessment, right, there's a measurement about your sort of like your preferences, right? Are you this D dominance preference, this I influence, this C conscientious, this S steadfastness? And contracting officers, the majority of them actually congregate around that C, that very conscientious group. They really like facts. They search for those facts, right? They're very, very interested in understanding, what the boundary is. And what I've found is that the folks who have some sort of shade of something else as well, like maybe a little bit of shade of D, like CD or CI or CS, those folks, I think, do a really great job of looking at themselves and then trying to figure out, well, what other parts, of this might be useful to me. We need to figure out ways to enhance that. I don't know necessarily what the answer is, but if we don't find a way to help these people feel a little bit more empowered from an educational standpoint, which is just one part of it, because there's also reviews that are problematic and things like that, then I think we're going to be in a position where this is going to be very, very difficult. And now that we have to make sure people understand this new rewrite and how things are different now, I think training and education becomes very, very important. Despite the fact that, again, like we started, a lot of people aren't pleased with a lot of training and education that's happening right now.
So you've
Nope.
made like 5 or 6 points that I think are brilliant. And so I'm going to kind of encapsulate them, because you mentioned that there are a lot of folks that have become so much a rule follower in trying to find how they are meeting the compliance in these things, that you think maybe that high D sort of personality might be the culprit, for lack of better terms, behind that behavior. And so you've been teaching contracting officers for a decade, and you've mentioned how personalities can find change uncomfortable. I'm paraphrasing, but do you think that this FAR overhaul would, in the world of us making sure we have to do both education and training, it's going to require a lot more education and training on critical thinking and interpretation versus blind compliance? Would you say that that's true? Because it sounds to me like you're saying that high D could maybe get in the way of their efficacy.
Not if like a contracting officer has high D. Like, it's really like when they get interfered, right? So a contracting officer is empowered by in the FAR or on paper to do to make a lot of judgments. I would say that many contracting officers don't get to really exercise that. It's been my experience that the vast majority of contracting folks that I've worked with, even folks who, again, fall in that C area, right, that they really like research, they like data, they like to understand the rules, that those folks are also still very interested in trying something new. But the big worry is I have to work with a cross-functional team of folks that have very different goals than I do. The contracting officer has this specific goal of making sure that we're getting the best value, that we are, following some compliance here, obviously, and that we're moving pretty quickly, right? We have these different things. That's not necessarily the same goal that many people in the acquisition team may have. And so I do think that sometimes there's a little interference that happens there. So to your point, we do need to make sure that our contracting folks know what is possible, but we also need to make sure that that whole line of folks knows what's possible as well, including senior leadership, right? Because if we don't have top cover, then all that hard work, all that pushing, like we're not going to get that from our contracting officers. Why on earth would a contracting officer or a program office or whoever, or the legal folks or the policy folks, want to interpret or do something when they know that their leadership is just going to default to whatever that other person said?
That's right.
And that's a really important part of it as well, and probably the most important part. Again, I don't think I've ever, even students that I've had just a flat out argument with about something, confidence ratings versus adjectival ratings, right? Like, that's a huge lightning bolt of an argument. Those folks are willing to try something, but they do generally, in my experience, feel like, why, I just know I'm going to get this sort of
They're going to
pushback.
get vetoed. Yeah. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like how in the Air Force, because that was my previous experience, there's an instruction that says this is a thing, but any commander can make that thing more stringent.
Sure.
They can't make it more relaxed, but they can make it more stringent. And so what you're
Sure.
saying is, even though the FAR allows for some of that critical thought and gives the contracting officer the opportunity to interpret and then make a decision, many won't, for fear of being vetoed on that decision. So they stick strictly with what they can read on the paper.
I think that's a big thing that happens. Yeah, right. It's easy to play things a little safer. And I unfortunately think that a lot of times our contracting colleagues just aren't trusted. I mean, I remember there is on LinkedIn, if you can find it, I won't say like who said it or anything like that. I remember bringing up, hey, the FAR says contracting officer has, the ability to use some judgment here. And I'll never get this person saying, well, if I thought my COs really understood the FAR, I'd feel more comfortable with them being able to use that that judgment, right?
Ooh.
Wow.
So,
Damn.
you know, that's just not conducive to having fantastic contracting officers keep working for that kind of thing. Now, I do know that there are a lot of great contracting officers that even under that sort of problem, they still work really hard and they do really beautiful things and they really, really try. But again, you can't make things move if you're constantly running up against somebody pushing back on you like
Yeah,
that.
I'm going to draw a parallel here. So, growing up in Hawaii, my family, and I don't know if all Hawaiian families were the same, but my family did this thing where when they thought you were ready to swim, they took you out on the pier and they dropped you in. And they gave you the opportunity to figure it out, right? Like literally sink or swim. And so it has felt a lot to me in GovCon that I have had a really great flotation device in our owner, Kikai, because he has tried desperately to walk me through some of the things that I have had to learn my way through. But as you and I were discussing before we came on here, we were talking about how many people in our profession, not only have we lost a lot of the institutional knowledge with the federal cuts and changes that have happened as of late, but that many folks are expected to just know. They walk in the door and they're given a manual and they're told, just go do.
Oh, yes.
And so here we are, like, my take on it was, hey, I've heard that you teach people everything contracting using Play-Doh and other tools to kind of make it very simple to understand. Like, teach me, Yoda, right? But you said that isn't true for a lot of folks. A lot of folks are just basically told to sink or swim, get in there, figure it out, go do. And what you're saying here, though, is that if there were not only education and training to the contracting officers, but maybe to their superiors on how contracting officers could use the FAR as a tool and not a constraint, it might help them unlock smarter procurement strategies.
I mean, I think so. I mean, but again, now, what's interesting is we're also still now talking about something we talked about just a bit ago, which is, senior leaders are senior leaders for a reason. But as you advance, as you sort of grow, um, what you need, what's important to you, the metrics you're held to by your own bosses, right? Those change as well. So yeah, there needs to be I think, education and understanding what your folks are going through, because your interpretation is different now, right? You're worried about other things, right? Um, I do want to pull on a thread you said though that I think is really important, and it is that not everybody is allowed the opportunity to do and like learn. A lot of times they are sort of thrown in, even like senior folks, just 13s, 14s, 15s, they like move to a new agency, and it is very much a sink or swim sort of scenario.
Great point.
The Some organizations have done like a really good job. DHS has a whole program for I think they have it for a variety of functionalities, but they have like an acquisition internship that's really substantive. And these interns get to like work for periods of time at different components within DHS, and they get a real crash course. They have, there's guest speakers and they take classes and they're like really like learning. And so, thank you DHS for doing something like that, but that's not something that everyone experiences. And everything I'm saying here today, I think I probably sound really privileged in the things that I'm saying, and it's true. When I was learning, when I was being taught, I just by chance ran into the right folks who were trying to teach me the right things. I can remember a guy named Keith Boyer, whom I absolutely love and adore. I think he's the best contracting officer ever. I was a GS like 9, and I remember him trying out interview questions that he was going to ask GS-13s on me. So he would like send me away. Like he'd be like, I want you to come back and write me a 1-page synopsis of the differences between these 3 FAR parts. And then I brought it back to him and he read it, and it wasn't just like a throwaway exercise. He then would sit with me and pull out his whiteboard and he would walk me through what I needed to understand about those different parts and how they might interact with each other. this a woman who also was at the NSF. Her name's Jen Shemansky. She talk about like OJT. She didn't make me feel like an idiot when I was doing my first IAA and I had all of these errors. She just checked them and explained to me why I needed to be more vigilant about certain things, or why I needed to, make sure I was filling out these different documents correctly. And then when I got to ASI governments and even CGI federal, where I was for a short period of time before I came back to I just was able to ask tons of fantastic questions, and no one ever made me feel like I was a burden, right? There's these two guys here for a while, Stan Livingstone and Stan Johnson, and these are guys who like have like a combined 80 years of experience, and I could ask them anything, and they would tell me from their perspective, even if they didn't agree with the perspective that I was sort of like going towards.
Yeah.
Stan Johnson, I remember we were talking about SEWs, and I really believe in SEWs, statements of objectives. And he's like, I'll be honest, I've never written one, but he still talked to me about them,
Yeah.
and some things that maybe he thought I would, need to be concerned about. Will Randolph, who used to be with us and has gone elsewhere, same sort of scenario. I can still call those folks. So the point in bringing that up is, one, I was very lucky that there were people who wanted to talk to me, and that now there's still people that want to talk to me. Eric Olmstead, uh, like another person, Polly Hall, all these other folks who are just willing to just give me information. Jeff Ouster, Frank McNally, all these folks. We also need an element of that.
Yeah, I mean,
Because, yeah, go ahead.
just piling in with your point, because I think you're making great points here. We hope to have people that come to us with information. We hope to have people that will check our homework and give us answers. I had an opportunity to sit in a seminar in front of a brilliant author and professor who said that she did a bad habit of grading papers, and if the paper was wrong, she would put all kinds of notes and things on it and mark it all up with things they could do. But if they did well, she just put a smiley face on it and never
Oh,
gave
yeah.
them feedback on how to be better, even if they were already doing well. And I like that you're saying that your mentors wouldn't just teach you, they would reinforce you. They would not treat you like you were stupid for asking a question, because if you shut people down, they'll quit asking and then they'll guess,
Absolutely.
and that's more dangerous.
Absolutely, and that is a little bit of a problem. I mean, I know a lot of folks that I've had the opportunity to teach, who like when we're doing different exercises, and I might say something like, "Hey, maybe you should just reach out to someone over there who tried that thing," where they're saying, "Well, those folks won't even get back to me." Um, well, now we're in a situation where like we really need that sort of network
Yeah.
in our world, because we've lost so many folks. And if our job, and I do think our job ultimately is to sort of create I mean, the FAR overhaul that's part of this as well, but to create that new generation of really fantastic contracting folks who can like do things, we first of all need to identify those folks a little bit better, but we also need to help them feel like they're not a burden,
Yeah.
and then share any information that we can that can be helpful, but also be willing to teach them things that maybe we don't feel all that comfortable about ourselves.
Which
Um,
means we have to learn. We have to keep
which
learning.
means we have to learn. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, you have to have that. I hate saying growth mindset. I don't like that. But you do have to like want to learn.
that's
You
true.
do have to like really want to do that, and you have to be willing to be wrong. And that in itself is very hard to do when you're a professional, because unfortunately we also don't have the opportunity to like practice, right? I never get the opportunity to like practice. Well, I do, like practice a
I do.
technique that might go bad, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like contracting folks just have to execute, which is a whole another problem, right? They never get a chance to even like work out the kinks ahead of
Well,
time.
and because there's so many things that have to be done, they don't necessarily have
They
the
don't have
time to
time.
learn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they don't have
yeah.
time, which is unfortunate, right? This is a little bit of like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right here. But like, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. Which, by the way, it's not because of them. It's because they're not allowed the time to do that. But I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. Oh crap! Like
Yeah.
this is real problematic as well.
But I think there's a
Um,
couple of other things that we miss out in this conversation on is some people sit and wait for people to come to them and share information, where I loved that you said, I tell people go reach out to someone, because sometimes you're going to have to take the initiative if no one's coming to you. If you want to know it, go find out.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just like so like goofy or dumb or something. Like I'm just willing to go talk to people. And I am an over familiar person just naturally. And so I have no problem doing that, but I do understand that that's not everyone. Again, I do come from a very privileged place in how I learned and what I've been able to ask and do and experience. But if I guess to sort of sum up everything we've talked about here, right? If we have this new overhaul coming, and we're going to have to learn how to operate inside of it, and we know that education is and training maybe isn't exactly what we want it to be, um, then we have to sort of build that education ourselves. We have to build that understanding and that toolbox is we're ultimately going to need to utilize in order to do our job really well. Um, and I think that this could be a really great, way to do it. And it's not really hard. And unfortunately, a lot of us are furloughed at the moment, so we could reach out to people. And I think that that is probably an important step to take, especially since we're all in the dark with how this is all going to,
For sure. And you're talking about all of us being in the dark, because we're not exactly sure yet what the total of the FAR overhaul is going to look like. So that could be a real headache, right? So, what practical steps should small and mid sized businesses take to make sure that they stay competitive, maybe under the new system? Like,
I mean, if you're talking about small businesses, I mean, it seems very apparent that you need to understand how to operate in the GSA structure, right? So, do you have a schedule? Do you not have a schedule? Is a very good first question to answer. But I mentioned somebody. His name is Will Randolph. I mentioned two Wills, Will Roberts and Will Randolph. And Will Randolph has a very wonderful post on LinkedIn. Go find him. Go look at it. And he talks about, like, do you need to have a schedule? Is it a good idea? Or is it a good idea to go try and get on a vehicle that exists that you might be able to get on? Those are some initial questions you need to be asking yourself.
yeah.
Because from a strategy standpoint, we don't know how many of those typical sole source strategies actually, but I don't know that any of those are really going to exist.
Yeah.
And then I would also start to think a little bit about the partnerships that you want to have, because it may be possible for you to continue to move forward without a schedule, without access to OASIS Plus or whatever. If you have some really good partnerships and you guys also provide each other something, I would make sure that you can provide that colleague that you want to work with, that business you want to work with, something that makes that partnership really powerful.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
making up each
why have
other's
that?
nexus, like filling in
Yeah,
those gaps, for sure. Makes you a stronger team.
absolutely. And then go look at ASI Education, of course, on our YouTube
Of
channel. That's
course,
that's the
dude.
next thing you should be doing.
I think that's great advice, because, we've been talking this whole time about both education and training, and from both the contracting officer and their superior, but also contractors. I mean, the landscape is changing. And so we need to make sure that as this landscape continues to change, that we understand what we can do. There's a book called Who Moved My Cheese? And while it's not exactly a one-for-one translation here, but it does talk about sitting still. Eventually you're going to go hungry, because that cheese that you've relied on all this time is going away. And if you haven't gotten up and moved around, tried to figure out where there's new cheese, you're going to be stuck in the background while everyone else is moving forward. So now's the time to start looking at your procurement processes and seeing if there's a way to do better before we even know what next looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So even with all of the frustration, you've said that there's opportunities here, especially for those who understand how to work within the system. So what is the silver lining for contracting officers and industry maybe in this new era?
I mean, the goal here is, I guess there's two little pieces. One is go see what they're doing with that RFO. There are a lot of really great resources that they've put together, and understand if any of that really impacts you. Um, because the silver lining is, like, you'll be prepared for it. You'll be able to prepare for it ahead of time, knowing that there's still time for comments, which is a really important thing, right? If there's something that really matters to you that's happening in this document, you should send those comments in.
For sure.
But the next piece is that we're all trying to figure it out. We're all trying to understand. And so that's pretty helpful, I think, if you are starting your journey or you've been on your journey for a little while, to know that now there's a little bit of some level setting that's happening, right? Again, you're all just trying to figure out, what does this new sort of thing look like? And if you figure out those first that first little bit of advice that I mentioned, which is, what is your strategy? I think you'll see more silver lining over time once you understand, like, what does this RFO mean for us?
This has been great. I've enjoyed the conversation. I love what you said ASI offers. I love the idea of both education and training. I spent a lot of time in that realm myself. So before we wrap up, because we are running out of time here, what I would like, Justin, is just give us, those that are tuned in here and those who might watch later, your unsolicited opinion on future government contracting. What's your opinion?
What's my unsolicited opinion on contract?
This always makes them think.
This entire episode, I think, was my unsolicited opinion on, like, the whole thing. But there is, and I think will always be, a market here, and the U.S. needs to remain safe. It needs to remain competitive. And one of the things I tell students when I see them, and I don't mean like DITAP or back to basic students, but like if I go like to a college or something, the government is generally a very exciting place to be involved, because you're solving problems that aren't the same as like a commercial organization. A commercial organization does have fantastic problems as well. I don't want to make it seem like they don't. But I can think of my own career and some of the very strange things that I've had to think about buying, and the positive effects that could ultimately have, right? Those effects are supposed to improve our country, right? And the way we are able to live, or how safe we can feel walking out the door. And I'm saying all this realizing that there's a whole lot of stuff happening in our world today. But generally, I would say there's so much exciting stuff that the government does, that the government buys, that the government researches. And I do think it's worthwhile to try and be a part of that, either as a government contractor or as a professional in the government. So don't sleep on the government. Come try and help them in some way. And always, I think, if you try and help the government first, profitability and all those other things do definitely follow.
Yeah,
that's my advice.
I love it. It's all in the effort of national security. We all get to play a part in it. And so I appreciate your opinion. I appreciate your time there. There you have it, everybody. Thank you, Justin. Thanks for everyone tuning in. And you can find more of Justin's work at ASI Education out on YouTube. And we'll see you next time right here on Unsolicited.